Alexis. Hi. How are you?
Good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so good. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Do
And we have so much in common and connection,
can't
and we're
wait.
gonna dive in. But I always start, the podcast with a hard-hitting question, and yours specifically is, are you ready? You ready? Okay, okay.
Right.
Clubhouse or Instagram? Ah, look at her.
You know what? Recently, Clubhouse. I
Recently,
got
tell me why.
well. First of all, I'm 36, so I kind of feel like Instagram for me is more about seeing my friends' pictures of their kids and like their
Yeah.
dogs and their
Mhm.
plants. So for me, it's become more of like this place where I go to like anonymously check up on my friends and like
Mm.
get pictures of their lives. But Clubhouse is like a live interconnection where you don't have to put on makeup. You can still wear your sweatpants. And you just are on audio. It's almost like a big
Yeah.
group conference call in a lot of the rooms.
It's a huge group conference call. Like
Yeah.
that's exactly what it's like. Do you think it'll be around for a while?
That's I think a lot of people are talking about that. I hope it is.
Hmm.
Um, I think it depends on the content and how it
Yeah.
evolves.
Yeah. That's where I met you on
Mhm.
Clubhouse. And I just love the stuff you were saying in the rooms. And, you get to have access to a lot of CDs and a lot of directors and producers and everything. But I just loved like, some of the stuff you were saying. So I was like, I'm just gonna ask if you want to come on the podcast. And as soon as I did, it opened up so many doors for us.
It did. Wasn't that
Yeah.
crazy?
It did. So your sister was on Bosch. I mean, worked on Bosch when we were like 3 seasons. I worked with her, and we didn't know that before.
Nope.
I slid in your DMs, as they say, right?
Yeah, it's true. The second you mentioned Bosch, I was like, hold on. Did you know Jessica Allen?
Yeah.
And you were like, wait, I'm there every day.
She did. She
Or
did.
shaved
And
head, I guess.
yeah, it's such a well, shaved it, but it was, I mean, they got me my own clippers, and I'm not supposed to tell anybody this, but I may or may not have been able to keep my clippers.
Isn't that nice? Isn't it nice to
Yes.
get a bonus at Rap? I love it.
Yeah. But well, they were because of we're in the time of COVID also, that they were just gonna go away,
Yeah.
throw them away. And so I was like, you bought them especially for me.
Yep.
So,
They're yours.
you know, they're mine. They're good. It's good. So just like me, you have little ones as well,
Mhm.
tiny humans, and and you have a nice little self-tape setup there as well.
Yeah.
That's your husband's, you said,
My
right?
husband's self-tape setup. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we transformed our garage into like a self-tape office studio to get away
Oh,
from like the kids and we're somewhere we can go and make some noise when they're napping or sleeping. So a lot of
yeah.
his self-tapes happen like after they're in bed.
Yes. So you're married to an actor then?
Yes. That's
Ooh.
how we met.
Oh yeah. That's not how you met. Is that what you said?
Everybody asked like, "Oh, did you guys meet in an audition?" I'm like, "No, we met on Bumble." And it just so
Oh.
happened that he was an actor because we're in LA, and I guess that's pretty common here. But
Yeah.
yeah.
That's so funny. I didn't even think of that. Like, when you said that, like, that's not how we met. My mind went to, oh, then you get us. You right? You get actors on a different level. You're like, I understand you more than you think, right? That's what I think, right?
So funny and so
Yeah.
true.
So you have, I mean, like your like, I don't want to say resume, but your history with like your journey to casting. I mean, you've been all over in the Southeast and everything. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm really thankful for it. I think it made me so much more prepared to come to the circus that is LA and how intimidating that can feel. And it gave me this whole new level of respect that people that do come to LA and just like build it up from the ground here. I felt like I had this major advantage and leg up because I worked in North Carolina in Wilmington
Yeah.
for this office. It was in Canada and Associates, and anybody who is in the Southeast knows who they are. They're
Yeah.
like the big casting office down there. And their associate at the time was Tara Feldstein Bennett, who now has Feldstein Paris Casting. So she took off and did her own Southeast casting office as well. And it was just a really cool time to be down there. I mean, it was like the heyday of Southeast TV. I mean, Atlanta was always great. New Orleans was great back then too. But Wilmington had like One Tree Hill and Eastbound and Down. And we shot the movie We're the Millers. It was just like this really, really fun time. And I started in extras casting and kind of was like a casting assistant in their
Mm.
office. So I helped them run sessions and like, you know, it really taught me sort of the language and what to expect when it came to LA. And it really helped me just sort of acclimate to the LA world. And the casting here is way different, but it gave me like the basics.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean by like way different? Give me like one example of that. What do you mean? So,
So, in the Southeast, we're primarily casting like co-star, guest star, like day
Mhm.
players, under fives, extras, like everything local, like people that actually live in that city. And then for LA, a lot of it doesn't even film here. So we're like attaching cast to projects that then go off to like Vancouver and Atlanta and all these different places to shoot. And so it doesn't really feel like you're part of it as much as it does in the Southeast when you're living it. And our offices were on the lot with the
Mhm.
stages. So we would like have lunch sometimes with casting crew. So here it's just much
Yeah.
different. It's much more removed in a way.
You're literally shipping us off to this year. I got an audition for a pilot, and they were like, "You have to go to New Zealand for 6 months." Like, so you don't really, you might never even meet us. I don't think I met the people on. I did meet them in the room, but I mean, we didn't see them again. I didn't. Everybody's like, "Do you know the people on Bosch like casting?" I was like, "I do," but I saw them once, and then I didn't see him again until like a rap party or something 3 years later. You know what I
It's
mean?
true. It's like the wrap parties, the holiday parties, if you have them. And other than that, it's your audition. And sometimes that's it, especially well, maybe you go into a producer session or a network test, depending on what kind of show it is. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's just that audition. And nowadays it's just a self-tape. So you
Right.
might
And so, what'd you say?
you might never see them at all.
Yeah, so it sounds like a little bit on the East Coast, I'll call it. Yeah, East Coast is a little bit more. You have a little bit more personable, right? You can, like you said, you can go meet them on set, and they have dinner or lunch, I mean, or something like that. So that seems like now I want that.
Yeah,
Well,
and
it's a good way to build a relationship,
it
right? I
is.
think.
And like all the actors know each other and the agents all know each other and the casting directors know the actors sometimes on a more personal level because you're bringing the same people in more often than you would here in LA where we're just much more of a, oversaturated market. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it
Well,
does breed a bit closer relationships.
well, you said something that I'm not going to let go by. I'm just not going to do it. You said the magic words of One Tree Hill. I
Oh,
can't believe I'm going to say this. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I was in love with One Tree Hill.
oh
You
my God.
people should know this about me by now,
Yes,
so
they
I'm going
should.
to I'm going to say it. I grew up on gosh, I think it was called UPN. Then it was called the WB, I believe, and then it was called CW, right? It transformed. And so
Yep.
I'm a big like Dawson's Creek, like, climbing the window. Like that has always been like one of my bucket lists. And so One Tree Hill
I love it.
was, and so I remember all of it. I mean, with Nathan and Peyton and, the dad. I mean, come on. I mean, there wasn't a lot of black people in that show, but I still related to the characters somehow. So you
I
would
mean,
you worked on that? Oh
yeah, I did the extras casting for that for the last few seasons. I also did
man.
extras work on it in the earlier seasons. That's how I got into casting was because I knew the woman who ran extras casting, her name was Kim. And so
Mhm.
when she went to go get married, I actually went in the office for her while she was gone and took over and like held her place. And that's how I got
Yeah.
into it, is through extras casting from One Tree Hill. That's how I got into
Mm.
casting at all. That
Really?
show, I owe my entire career to that show.
we were destined to meet. I mean, there was just so many reasons.
And I don't know if you heard of it, James and Steven, from Winter
Yeah.
Hill, James Lafferty and Stephen Coletti, they actually went on and created their own show. Everyone is Doing Great. It's on Hulu, premiered, I think, on like January 13th,
Recently.
very recently. So Hulu acquired it. They were shooting it forever on their own. They like went and
Mm.
created their own show, and it's so good. I mean, I think it
What is
really
it called?
Everyone is Doing Great.
Everyone is doing great. We got to
Logan Mark
check this out, y'all.
but yeah, it's great.
Yeah. On
It's
Hulu. I
really
did
cool.
not know that. I did
Mhm.
not know that. Blonde hair guy, I can't remember his name now, who was on the lead of the show. Yes, Chad McMurray. There it is. There it is, Chad McMurray. I did. I can't remember, guys. If you're listening to this, you need to watch this on YouTube because I'm blushing. But I went and did Agent Carter, and he was on Agent Carter, right? And so I did an episode of Agent Carter, and like he walked by me, and I was just sitting there like, "Be cool, DaJuan. Be cool."
I love this so much. Oh my God.
You
So
know? It's good. It's good. I love that. I love that. So, okay. All right. I'm all right. Enough about me. Enough about that. Okay, so what's been your favorite show then to cast? Like I want to hear like what's been your favorite and what's your dream show to cast?
Oh God, I really love this question because there's so many different answers. I mean, recently I worked on this movie called Lorelei. It's currently still on a festival circuit, but it will be released for audiences worldwide after that. But it was such a fun process. It was Kevin Chenoy and Francesca. They're the producers of the Florida Project, which
Okay, yes.
was this fantastic indie, like one of those great indie years of film. And so it went on to be a nominated film. And so they did Lorelei, which is another like small town story, which I always love. There's just something very untold about those stories that I think when they're told in a relatable way and authentically, although I don't really like the word authentic, but when it's told that way, it's very endearing and emotional. And so they're very good at that. And the script, they wanted to attach the two leads. And so we got Jenna Malone and Pablo Schreiber, who I'm huge fans of. So that was just like a moment of like one of my very first indie films on my own with my own casting director credit. And it was also one of my favorite ways of working, which is to attach talent to a script in order to kind of help bring value to it. They already had their financing, but a lot of times now where I'm finding myself doing that is to help films then go and get their financing. So it was just a very, very cool process. And like, I was a huge fan of the actors. So it was just like this moment where I was like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do all the time, forever.
So would you say you like the indie world? Like you like you can get in there a little bit differently than the network, TV show, which are great as well. But I understand there's a different machine, right?
Yeah, totally different machine. We work in a much more of like a producer capacity in that world, which I love. I like all casting. I love working with actors, but I also love working with producers and directors and writers and really like fleshing a story out and helping it come to life. There's something about being in those early steps that is just really rewarding in a whole different way.
Yeah, that's good. So what about your dream role? Where do you want to go next? Is it Game of Thrones? Please say Game of Thrones.
So yes, a Game of Thrones-esque show is my ultimate dream. And we have something in early development that feels kind of like that. So like fingers crossed we get some good news soon on that. But I just watched Judas and the Black Messiah, and it was cast by Alexa Fogel, who I'm a huge fan of. But it was like seeing that and that true story. And then afterwards, like, I'm not going to give anything away in case anybody doesn't know the story. It's based on a true story, but like the interview clips they showed afterwards from Eyes on the Prize 2, and you see this guy who Lakeith Stanfield plays, who I'm also a massive fan of, who's also on Clubhouse. And it was just like this moment where I was like, this story, like the fact that it hadn't been told yet, first of all, is infuriating in a way, because like we tell every tiny little white American story that comes along like that. But then there's all these great Black stories coming out now, and they feel so important and full and like emotional and raw and brutal. Like the way these stories are, it's just everything that you want to be educated about and learn about. And it's like, why? I mean, we know why.
We know
but
why.
Like, why aren't these stories being told in this way more often? Like oh my God, David Coulier. I mean, they're all just so amazing on this movie. It's just so good.
I'm behind on that. I'm going to just fess up and say I haven't seen it yet, but the only reason I haven't seen it yet, don't spoil it. Kids, I'm just going to be honest. By the time like 8:30, 9 o'clock hits, when I get them to bed, and then it's like this short window of like study for your sides.
That's it. That's all you get in your day. My husband and I talk about it. It's like 8 to 11. That's our time. And so I'll tell you when I watched it on the Peloton doing a 60-minute endurance class. Over 2 nights. It took me 2 nights to watch it. And that's the only way I was able to get to it. But I made it a goal this year to go through and like watch these films that are like on the awards panels and getting voted on and stuff. I was like, I have to do it this year. It's a big deal. Plus, I want to know the producers and directors coming up. And a lot of times they have relative unknowns on those. And it's like, I need to know who these people are.
It sounds like you really take your career seriously. Like you didn't just happen into casting. It sounds like, well, if you did, you're like, I'm here, I love it, and I'm gonna like expand. That's what I'm getting from you. Is that you feel like you love it? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, love it. Love it. Love film in general, but yes, this process, this part of it, it's just so cool.
It's just so cool. Well, tell us a little bit of a state of the union. I feel like there should be like a part of the podcast was like, and we hear like a state of the union for casting right now. Speaking about like, post pandemic, we're all on self tapes. Like, we're like, what's going on that side that we might not know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is changing. I mean, so the Southeast has always done self tapes. They're like 10 years ahead of LA when it comes to that.
They're
And
so rude, by the way. This Southeast is so rude. My friend Alex Collins, he's over there. He's like, while you all are like, hey, here's how we do self tapes. He's like, I'm sipping tea watching you. they're,
yeah,
like, they're like, we're so good over here. And I'm like,
they've been doing it. And like, that's the thing. I think it's such an important tool to have in an actor's. We always talk about the actor's toolkit, like self tapes, because they also give you freedom. I'm married to an actor, obviously. And like, I remember he would have auditions in Santa Monica and he'd be gone for like, 5 hours. If it was like a bad time of day, that's half the day. So if he had another job, he'd have to probably give up like a shift or call out or do something. We would have to find childcare if I was working in the office that day. We would have to like spend money or lose money for him to go to these auditions. And then you're paying for parking and you're like, all these other
parking
things.
ticket or anything if you don't get, yeah.
Exactly. So part of me as a casting director is like, hey, man, like I am married to an actor. I know how much time these auditions take up and how many times come back when I schedule an audition or have a schedule. Agents are like, they can't make that time work. Can they come in at another time? And I'm like, I don't have any other times, but they can self-tape. And it's like, you get this pushback where it's like, well, they'd rather come in the room. And I get it. Because it's fun in the room. You get to talk to a real person. You get feedback in real time. You sort of get to play a little bit if they have the time. But like what I kind of try to tell people is it's like, for most cases, we're in a rush. We're trying to hurry through 1 or 2 takes, move on. The second you're out of the room, it's just like, okay, on to the next person. It's not really as personable as I think we would like it to be when it's like, like the normal everyday auditions. Of course, there's other tiers that might be different when you start talking about like producer and director meetings and stuff where it's a little more intimate. But like the everyday auditions, I mean, we see like hundreds and hundreds of people per role, and we have to see them all within like a week or 2, maybe 3 weeks, and then get all these selects sent over to production and then get their feedback. And then, so it's not really an intimate or fun process, to be honest. There's like something to be said about being in the room with the actors, but I get maybe more enjoyment out of a self-tape because it's kind of on my own time. I meet more actors that way than I do seeing them in person because I can get 500 self-tapes in the same time I might be reading, I don't know, 6 people. It's like you get so many more auditions and you can just sit there and watch them and replay them. And the one thing I always say to like encourage actors is it's like, I mean, we can tell if you can act or not. That's our job. So even if you get the character wrong or you get the tone wrong, we can see the thread there that's like, oh, well, they can act. Let's just give them a couple redirects and have them either retape, or what happens most often is I just put them straight to callback.
Yeah.
Like we'll just play in the room, we'll just play in the callback and give some redirects. But yeah.
So I got a couple questions for you that just came up when I was listening to you. The first one is, one of the things I try to tell actors is we must stop romanticizing the room, right? That's the key thing, because I remember, and maybe I'm just by myself, but I remember, and no offense to any casting director out there listening to this, that we would sometimes go in there and maybe they weren't having the best day, or maybe they were hurried, maybe they had already found whatever it is. And that room experience, it wasn't bad. I don't want to give that. Nobody was ever rude or anything like that. But some people, it was just moving. So the room wasn't always as romantic, we're like, oh, the room, I can feel the energy. Sometimes it wasn't great. I would have liked to have done a self-tape for those. You feel me? Like, it's not, but that's not rude. 100%. It's just, we're out there. We're like, but the room,
exactly.
the schlep across the room.
I think just not romanticizing the room, because it's a small part in the whole process. Because while those casting directors are in their rooms, we have emails piling up, phone calls piling up from different producers. And, we have other things we need to get through that are part of that process too. Paperwork, deal memos, like Taft-Hartley's, like we do so much on the other side of casting that isn't just auditions that, meeting and finding actors is the core of our job. It's the heart of it. And it's the reason we're here doing what we do. But I think people tend to forget because they don't see it or they don't know about it. But a lot of our other part of the job is paperwork. And honestly, we should be getting paid as lawyers because we're negotiating offers and like making sure we're following labor laws and all this other stuff that's just like very, very intense and it like takes up a huge part of your brain. And so it can feel exhausting to go from like 6 hours to auditions to like, then you're sitting down and like trying to catch up on all this stuff that you maybe were missing. So I can totally, totally agree that those rooms are probably not the most calming or like
that we're
Well,
making them.
presents.
Well, that we're making it. We're like, oh, don't forget the room is so great.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I got to see being on, being on Bosch was sometimes the producers were looking at the tapes on their phone, like in between takes, or like it wasn't. We think as actors they're gonna like set a little, candle, some
Yeah.
popcorn, and they're gonna like, and they're gonna like watch ourselves. It's not. They're getting them in when they can because they still have an entire show. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. So on the producer side, it's even more of like
Yeah.
a time constraint to try to fit in watching these tapes, which is why we only send like 10 to 20 per role, depending on the size of the role.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're going through 5,000 submissions down to like
Mhm.
400 selects. And out of that, maybe 200, 150 tape. And then we're watching all of those and then bringing those down to like 10 to 20 selects that we then
Yeah.
send off. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So as we're talking about the State of the Union, one more question about this, because I think one of the things also that has gone from the room situation is that immediate sense of gratification, like if you get a call back or if you get like that piece, not like the call response thing, but I think self-tapes have eliminated the callback, right? Unless they're going to do a virtual, because in there, a self-tape, and I could be wrong about this, but a self-tape right now feels like it's your pre-read and it's your callback, because I don't have to call you back if I've already seen what you can do. You know what I mean? Because you cast off tape, or we can send that tape to producers. What is your feel on that? I mean, I'm just making this up.
Well, I think there are a lot of offices that do it that way. And for me, yeah, that's usually how it works. I know with TV, it's still very traditional in the fact that they'll do like pre-reads on self-tapes, and then they'll do like Zoom callbacks, and then they'll do like Zoom director producer meetings. So I think it's much more traditional virtually in the TV world still.
Yeah.
And in the network and streaming worlds, I'm sure. But on indie film, yeah, oh yeah, much more. And I think even in studio film, we just did a film down in Savannah, Georgia, and yeah, most of it was done on just, hey, here's a tape, give us who you like. And then maybe they'd have them retape, but normally they would just cast them off tape.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you say to those actors that are like, I just need an adjustment. I just want to figure out what the casting directors want. What do you say to them then? Because
So, I mean, this is why I think this conversation is so cool, because I started 14 years ago in the industry and it has changed a lot, but nothing that we utilize has really changed. And the methods we use don't really change. But we have to realize that what technology has done for us is, first of all, given us a way to streamline our process, which I think has been a very slow process, but I think it's necessary because there are so many more actors now that can be actors, and there's so many more agents and managers that can be agents and managers because of the influx of actors that now have access to being actors. But we're not getting more casting directors necessarily. We still have a casting director and an associate or an assistant. We rarely get both anymore. So now we're having less people to do more work, but the same amount of hours in our day.
wow.
And so it's just a very interesting world. And this is what I mean, like kind of when I say, like, we really just need to start moving forward as an industry, because casting feels so archaic to me in a lot of ways. And so I think a lot of that actor mindset of like, I really want to get in the room. I want to get the live feedback. I want to do this. It's like, that is romantic. It's a romantic ideal. But I think the ways that started was like back in the day of studio casting, when the head of the studio would like bring in 4 or 5 actors and really have like all day to spend with them. And then they cast in-house that way. And, a lot of wives of studio heads were casting directors. Like that's how it kind of started. And so it hasn't really changed since then. Like our process, if you think about it, is still very, very similar to like the 50s in that way, where it's like, we see you in the room and then we tell you that we like you. And then you come back for a producer. It's like, well, okay, that's great. But self-tapes, I think, are the way that we have to make sure we adapt. And there's a lot of good in that, because first of all, I get to meet more actors. Even if you're not seeing my face, I'm like meeting you. And I remember good auditions, and I remember people I've seen before, and I bring them back for other stuff, especially if I have another agents. But the other side is that now actors have freedom. You don't have to pay LA rent. You don't have to be so local that you have to drive in for an audition the next day. You could live in like Arrowhead, or you could live in Palm Springs, or you could live in Vegas. I mean, it really opens up sort of the freedom of a lifestyle for the actor.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because this is more pandemic thinking. But once the pandemic hit, I was thinking I could go home and live with my mom in the area to be with her for a month, and I could do self tapes from there. I could
Totally.
do I can just do it all because we're doing it virtually there. I mean, I don't want my mom to read with me. That
It's true.
well, here's the thing. There was a little bit of taboo around, let's say a year ago, this time last year, that people couldn't, if you did a virtual reader, right? If we had a virtual reader, our casting was like, nah, that doesn't work well. We need a person in the room with you reading at least. Now everybody's like, great, do a virtual reader. We got it. Just make sure you're well lit. We can hear you, those things. And I'm like, well, that just opens up so many doors to us. We really don't have to, live here, as long as we can fly here, we book it or something like that. We can just be that. I think
and
that's
usually you have a couple days notice. So even if you're within driving distance, that's totally doable.
Yeah.
And everybody knows somebody in LA. I'm sure there's like free places to stay for a day or two while you figure it out. But the thing about that too, is that also says how I'm saying like casting feels archaic. Why do we care if the reader's virtual? Why are we making anybody have in-person readers if we're asking them to self-tape? We're already imposing on actors to do all of this work for us for free, whether it's in person or self-tape. We shouldn't get to set parameters like you have to have a live reader in the middle of a pandemic. And so the fact that it took so long for casting to like, or agents or managers even, to adapt to the fact that we're like, just have a reader, even if it's somebody on your Zoom with you. But now there's like places like weaudition.com where you can like book live readers with you and they'll do it with you on Zoom and read with you and kind of coach and work through the scene with you. It's like having another actor buddy there on your screen. So the industry is adapting, but it is a shame that there's so many like casting professionals that don't feel as open to that part of it, because that just hurts the actors. It doesn't hurt us. We're still going to get all the auditions we need because this industry favors us. Like we are the favored side of the acting relationship. So I feel like the more we can make it easy for actors, the easier it's going to be on us, not the harder.
Yeah, and I think actors too. There are a lot of, like I said, you're saying you all can bend a little bit, but actors can also, I liken it to, we actors are holding on to those black and white headshots. We're like, no, it must be this way. And Actor Trade out there, which is an app, does exactly that as well. You can have a reader anywhere in the world, like pop on this app with you. So there definitely are those options out there. I'm going to ask a very controversial question here. Okay. And I want to be clear, everybody listening to this, Alexis is just talking for her, right? She's not talking for, because everybody's like, well, I heard this casting director said, and, which is a whole thing with me, right? I think one person hears it from one casting director and they think it must be everybody feels that way, right? So that's why I make that disclaimer. But real talk, do you think we're going to be getting back into the rooms? Because I'm feeling like this is like, if it really, what we're also doing, and we're not saying this because you're such a nice one, nice CD, is it also, you don't have to see a lot of the people who are not ready to be in casting director rooms. Is that a good way of saying that right now? They're not ready. Yeah.
Because you have to remember, if somebody's totally wrong, you're still forced to go through that 10 to 15 minutes of auditions with them, because you can't say in the room, oh, you were just not right. We'll see you later. Sorry, you drove all the way out here and parked and like got here and remembered your sides and probably paid for parking or something, or took off a shift at your bartending job. I mean, like, that's just the reality of the world. Yeah. And so if somebody's not right, it's a waste of time on both people's parts. It really is. And we have to be able to say that. We have to be able to say, we're wasting the actor's time and we're wasting our time. So self-tapes take that part out already. That's a huge benefit of self-tapes. If you're not right, it's not bad on you. Just you could be perfect for another role. It's not a bad thing. Yeah. And I think what we know, when we know we're right or wrong for something, it just helps us. We can move on to the next thing. So yes, I do think we'll get back in the room, because I think there also is like a certain process that is beneficial for, especially if it's like a turnaround or you just have like a handful of actors to see. For me personally, I'm gonna model Lorraine Mayfield and just have most of my self-tapes as my pre-read. Like most of my pre-reads just be self-tapes, because it cuts down on the time. It allows you to see more actors, but also it cuts down on production costs in a lot of ways too. They're not paying for an office space. They're not paying for, the space to have all these hours of the day spent in the room. I can do my home office for self-tapes and then rent a space for like different sorts of in-person things that we might need to do. I mean, that's one model. I think I'd always like to have a permanent office, but just saying, for a lot of independent casting directors, they don't have like a permanent office. It's a big thing to go get your office set up ahead of a job. And so when you're doing that for 4 or 5 jobs a year, it's a huge task.
Yeah, and I would imagine also now with the state of our world that, before I used to go in these shoebox sized,
Mhm.
casting rooms because that's what you needed. But now with close quarters and, things going around, people casting already didn't want to shake hands. Now you got a virus thing. You know what I mean? I just feel like it's probably safer bet to think that like get really great at self tapes.
Yes, and I think that if we embrace that, it's only going to help. And I think really the actors more than anybody, because it's
Yeah.
just going to make your process that much more concise and the least amount of time wasting possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think for a lot, and I don't want to say it this way because I don't want to sound like I'm against or for one demographic more than the other,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of the younger or more traditionally trained casting directors, like those that came up as an assistant to an associate to a casting director who've kind of gone through the whole, trial of becoming a casting professional, which is very hard and long lived. It's going to just be more of that. I think the
Okay.
younger generation tends to embrace the technology more.
Mhm.
And I think that's true across a lot of occupations, not just casting and acting.
Yeah.
But I do tend to get more pushback on self-tapes from agents and managers who are maybe older or like not as connected with casting directors on their side of the process.
Or
And I think
tech savvy. It's a lot of tech too.
yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, it's hard to adapt when you haven't had to do it before. It's not fun downloading and uploading tapes and renaming files. It's not
Hmm.
fun. It really isn't.
You don't
But
like it? You don't, that's not what you get up in the morning thinking?
right. Like none of us do. So I get it. I get where there's like the hardships and the parts that are hard to adapt to. But I also think that if we do embrace it, it's just going to open the door for more actors and more casting directors to have a streamlined process that's easier on everybody.
Yeah. Okay. I want to close this self-tape portion, right? Because I want to close it down with just asking you that if you are sitting there, Alexis, and you're thinking about the younger actors or older actors or just actors in general, can you think of like maybe one golden nugget? Like you can just like give them just one golden nugget from a love letter from you to the actors out there just about self-tapes.
And we watch every single one of them, hoping you nail it. And even if you don't, wanting to give you another chance. So if we see that you can do it, we're probably going to just give you another chance to retape because that just tells you the casting director likes you. I think
Yeah.
that's a great thing to remember is that we're always on your side and we want you to nail it.
You're on our side, even in self tapes.
Even in self-tape.
Well, I think that a lot of actors, I could put myself in that group. Sometimes we think that, they don't watch them all. That's it. You know what I mean? Like because it's going out there in the ether. We never hear anything. And, so it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that is the hardest pushback of it is nobody knows what's happening. But we do. We watch at least again, speaking for any office I've worked in and who I've learned from, I've worked in probably 6 or 7 offices and every single office goes through every single submission and watches every single self-tape.
Yeah. Great, great, great. So diversity and casting. I was joking with you a little bit ago, and I was like, "There are no black people on One Tree Hill."
I know.
And when I heard you speak in one of the clubhouses, you had piped in on something. Somebody was saying something. I don't remember the exact thing, but you said something to the effect of, "Hey, everybody, we need to be careful about putting the onus back on people of color." I don't remember, but it hit my heart when you said it. You piped in, and I was like, I feel seen. Like I don't have to like walk you through why that's something that you shouldn't have said. And again, everybody that's listening, it was not. I can't remember what the conversation was, but you piped in on it, and I just wanted. I was like, I immediately that day, I was like, I'm gonna ask her to come on the show. Do you remember that at all? Like,
I do remember the room. It was actually about the CSA town hall for Black actors. The CSA.
Okay.
CSI, the Casting Society Cares, and they, equity and diversity in casting. They have a whole department that sort of like specializes. We actually just did over the weekend the CSA open call for Black actors as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I remember that room and they were discussing it. And it was one of the agents had asked, "Can you explain that to me or give me some resources to go research this to a Black woman?" And I was like, "Hey guys, can we just remember?"
Yeah.
We can do our own research. Google is a thing. Like, I think the problem with, and I will speak for white people here because I don't really care. They're just so used to having things, we're used to having things handed to us. We're used to things being in our favor and from our perspective. And so I think when all of a sudden it's like, hey, let's learn about other people's perspectives, we're like, okay, teach us. And it's like, no, don't do that. Do not put the burden on the people who are on the attack, like that are being attacked. Like we should not be also asking them, hey, I know you're having a hard time right now, but can you tell me about how you are feeling and why? Like, why do you feel that way? It's so, it kind of comes across as a teaching opportunity and an educational opportunity for white people to be in a position where we can go, we need to learn about this and not place the burden of being educated, of teaching us on people of color, because it's just work. It's emotional labor. It's not fun.
Yeah.
It's not
So
fun
if
to
you,
talk about what the pain is.
if you get to speak for all, people of non-color, then I get to speak for POC then right now.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you. I like, as a person of color in that room, in that space, I heard that and it immediately just it was like, because there's a little bit of a weight and you feel a certain way about it and you're like, oh, I got to lift this. But just hearing allies in there say that in that space was just beautiful. So thank you. I don't know if anybody has said that to you, but I thank you for.
Thank you. I mean, thank you guys for being in that space and holding that space and allowing people like me to come in and not only listen, but also I think that's part of the job of allies. We can't just say we're an ally. You really do need to be there to call out other white people when they're doing something that's not exactly right. And I don't want to do it in a way that is hurtful to anybody. I want to start seeing us want to educate each other instead of, there was some quote somebody made about like Ted Cruz or somebody. It's like, well, if you give nobody a path to redemption, then what's the point of them wanting to do better? And I was like, well, I don't really care about Ted Cruz, but it's very applicable to, I think, just the white population, especially in this industry in general. We have to give them a path to go towards that makes it easier to do better rather than just making them feel awful for getting it wrong. Like, okay, you messed up and that's fine. And I mess up all the time. But what I think we need to do is just take those opportunities to go, okay, I really screwed it up this time. So next time I don't want to do that. So let me go learn how to not do this again. Right. And I think just offering those opportunities to people in any situation, but very much so in these really difficult and uncomfortable conversations. I mean, I think that's part of what I want to kind of do as a white woman in casting, because that's what most casting directors are white women. We have in there to be an ally.
I think it was, I want to be clear, everybody, because you weren't part of this conversation that was happening, that I don't think there was an attack that happened or anything like that. So it wasn't confrontational. It wasn't anything like that. It was just, I just want to paint that picture. And I don't think that other person felt like it was an attack. It was just like, hey, let's just I just want to make sure, because it wasn't.
Yes, it wasn't anything negative. Absolutely. No, it was actually a very nice, beautiful, safe space. But I did want to just kind of step in and make sure that we weren't asking these people of color up here spending their time and energy to again, hold a space where white people could come in and sort of talk. I think it was just important in that moment to offer that, hey, let's not put the burden of educating us on people of color. Let's go ahead and remember we can educate ourselves. So but it was a very lovely conversation. I think I was just speaking more in general.
Yes, I know, but I don't want anybody to come for you or anything like that, and just understand the whole thing. But when we're talking about diversity and casting right now, where do you feel like we're at? Where do you feel like, because I think a lot of people of color, we're on this side of where there's not enough on TV, or there, maybe it looks like they're telling us they care, but then we see a whole billboard full of just, people of non-color, and it's like, it's like, it just, so I'm just wondering on your end, and I know the tide takes a little bit to turn, right? So we do have, Yeah,
I agree. I think what it's going to take here is the entire industry, because the buck doesn't stop with casting. We're just kind of that last door, or the face of it, because we have that position where we're the ones seeing all the actors. But it really takes people writing these roles and not writing it from a white person's perspective. We need to start getting more writers of color in these writers' rooms that have these perspectives. And then when we start talking about diversity in the form of ethnicity, we also need to talk about diversity in the form of ableness. if we're writing about stories of people that are blind or hard of hearing or anything, we need to make sure we have people that are writing or at least advising or consulting in those spaces, so that we're writing from a position where it's like not told through the white male gaze or whatever that, whatever the perspective is. And I think that naturally, by having these writers' rooms full of diversity, the scripts will start being more diverse, because there's going to be all these different perspectives working together. And I think that's been a great push in the world of writers, is to get more people of color stocked in the writers' rooms, like higher up developing writers, and writers' assistants need to start getting more involved in the process, I think, too, because that's going to lead to more writers eventually coming up. So it comes down to the hiring of production and writing staff too, I think.
That's good to hear, and I love that. I have one of my best friends I went to college with is at one of the big 5 agencies. He's an agent at one of the big 5, and they created a task force, a diversity, equity, inclusion task force. After everything that happened in June, and he was like, DaJuan, he was like, we're doing this. What do you think? What else would you want there? And I was like, I want to be completely honest with you. I think the task force is great. I think it's a great step. But what you could really do for a person of color is go out there and get people of color on your roster that might not be ready, but you can help develop in your thing. That's going to help the most. You having a task force of how just to speak to people of color is great, but like lifting those people and not waiting for them to make you buku money, but like your brand, your name automatically can help springboard careers. Like that's what I need.
Definitely. I mean, we can talk about agencies and their levels all day, but you see ICM or WME on somebody's reps, like that's their representation. You automatically place them in a place where it's like, oh, well, they've got to be good if they got into an agency like that. So there is a bit of like I don't want to say bias because it's like too aggressive of a word, but yes, there is a certain prestige that comes along with that. And I think you're right. Hiring developing actors in those spaces where they don't usually really hire developing actors at those agencies would be a major help. And I think you're starting to kind of see that happening. These showcases that are kind of not happening more, a little tough, and now they're doing them virtually, which helps. But those were like a big part of like the process to find developing actors that were looking for representation. And so the access to those is also important. And we always talk about like go to school, get training, go to college. And to me, that's always felt a little privileged and elitist. Not everybody can go to college. Not everybody can go pay for these classes and these trainings, but I think there's something to be said about like go to an improv class. Those are often free or super cheap. And I think for me personally, and for a lot of casting directors I know, when we look at your resume, if we see improv on there, we're automatically like, oh, awesome. Like we love seeing improv training on a resume. It's like the biggest perk in my opinion on training.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, I just want to make sure, like, I love the direction DEI is going, and it's very interesting. And I can talk to all the actors about this, but now it's swinging, and now you have people. They're like, well, now I can't get in the room because now we have, and I'm like, just calm down, everybody. You know what I mean? Calm down. All right. So we're gonna do a little bit of a lightning round here, like a lightning round. Get some of these questions out and just think and see where you land here. So we talked about self-tapes a little bit, but let's talk about, do you think memorized or not memorized?
I think being comfortable in the scene, biggest important thing to me. I don't care how off book you are, because if you're off book and you're not comfortable and you're stuttering and messing up and having to retake a bunch, it's going to get in your head. So I'd rather have you hold the sides, grab a line when you need it, but get through the scene in a way that looks great. That's not going to bother me.
Finish this prompt. The most important thing for an actor.
Confidence.
Ooh, I always say confidence books.
It does. You come in the room and you're like, hey, nice to meet you. What's up? All right, I'm ready. Let's do this. It's like, oh, cool. All right. Somebody who's like ready to get down to business. It's really nice. The confidence really does pay off, I think.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. Ready? How you feeling? Are you feeling good about the questions? All right. What's the hardest part of your job?
Oh my God, the paperwork and the legal stuff. It's not as fun. It's a little scary because you don't want to mess it up.
Yeah. I often also think that it must, I think casting directors are a little bit empaths as well. And so they know when a lot of people want to book this, and you want to like be the ones that give them that job too, but you can't give everybody the job. Everybody can't get that one role, right?
There is. Yeah, it is cool to say no. It's hard too. And like some of my really good friends are agents and managers. And when they pitch me these really cool people and I'm excited about them, and then maybe production or the director is like, well, they're not quite right. I always hate going back and being like, they didn't think they were quite right. But oh my God, I'm so thankful for that my agent friends pitch me these wonderful actors. So it's hard to say no. You don't want to say no. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. How about, what do you wish people would stop telling actors?
That they have to get in the room with us in order to ever book, because that's just not true. And that we care about their resumes the way that I think it's told that we do. I don't really care about a resume. I don't even usually look at a resume. I look at the audition first and foremost, before a headshot, before a reel. Reels are supplemental to your auditions. They aren't like what gets you the audition. I mean, seriously, it's like I look at your little thumbnail on Breakdown Express, and if you look even the tiniest bit right, I'm going to have you pre-read. Like I'm going to have everybody pre-read, because I think that's the best way to meet actors.
It's so interesting. I remember something just sparked in my head when you said that. I remember when I was in the rooms, a lot of rooms I would go into, people I didn't know, I would start reading, I would start my audition, and we would do it back and forth. And then you always see them like look at you, and then they go here or your headshot and just turn it over. Right. It's like, oh, okay. They know what they're doing. Now I can look at the resume. It wasn't the resume. Yeah. And I didn't put that together till you just said that, huh?
Yeah, your resume
Okay.
doesn't really, and it's opposite of like, I guess, every other industry. Your resume isn't what gets you the job. The job gets added to your resume, but like we don't care about the resume ahead of time. We just want to meet all the people we can.
I didn't. That's not okay. One more. What do you wish actors understood about your job or process?
Oh yeah, I think we did a good job of covering some of that in the beginning, like just all the stuff we have to do in our day. I think that they think we spend a lot of time sitting around like judging actors, but we don't. I mean, like honestly, I could probably count the amount of bad auditions I've had on 3 fingers. Like and those were people that were rude. It wasn't even about their talent. It was just rudeness that I remember. I don't remember their audition. I remember how they talked and treated me in the room or like in the callback. So yeah, I think just realizing that the casting's 99.9% of the time on your side. We want you to book the role. We want to have 20 people that are so good we can't choose between them. So yeah, we're on your side. There's no judgment.
That's so funny because again, when you said that, I had this idea of, you're right. They're not sitting there like in their head. We're renting space in your head for years, right? We're like, DaJuan's never come back because he said the instead of the.
I mean, it's true. We see so many people in a week. We're not going to really remember. And that's why I always tell people, like, everybody's like, I want feedback. And it's like, there's just not really any feedback to give. It's usually like, you did a great job. We just went with somebody else. And it wasn't that you did a bad job. You just weren't exactly what the producers were looking for. So like, everybody's like, we never get feedback. And I'm like, I'm going to tell you, your feedback is probably, we loved your audition, but you weren't quite right. 99% of the time. Yeah, it's true.
Well, it's a big question we have here. I'm going to land this plane with, a lot of actors are out there trying, and I have my thought on this, but a lot of actors are out there trying to get from co-star to guest star, or guest star to recurring a series. And I guess I just wondered, like, from your side of the world, right? As we're getting this out there to actors all over the world, your side of the world, like, what steps are people taking? Is it just like the craft, or is it, I'm trying to formulate this question on the fly, guys.
Good question.
It's a good question, right? But it's like, what do we tell actors? What would you tell an actor to ask you this question?
I'm sure you've heard in clubhouse rooms, this is like a big one that gets asked. How do I move on from the co-star world into like guest star and recurring and series regular? And TV is so unique. It works so much differently than film in so many ways. And that's one of the ways. It's like this tier, this ladder that you're trying to crawl up. And, as somebody who's booked series regular roles, it's like, that's what you want. That's like life-changing for so many people to get that series regular role, because that naturally helps you roll on to the next job a little bit easier. You don't have as much to climb in order to like get a chance at the next job. For me, for that process, it can be so different for people. Sometimes you book a really cool film job and that gives you a leg up to then go from co-star to like guest star to recurring series regular. Like sometimes if you take a break from the TV auditions and you go book like a really cool, even if it's just like a Hallmark movie and you get like a lead in a Hallmark movie or supporting in a Hallmark movie, that's like a really cool thing to have on your reel for your reps to then use to pitch you for recurring and series regular roles. And then you get those auditions, and the more you get those auditions, the odds say you're more likely to then book one of those roles. So the thing I always tell actors is like, don't get stuck on like one linear path. Like be open to going in a different direction in order to get there, because I don't think film is linear, because it's a creative world. When we get down to it, there's a lot of it that is very business and financial and very like very regimented. But the part that we're on as the actors and directors and writers, it's very creative. And so there's all these different ways I think that you can make it work. I always tell people like create your own content and like get it somewhere really cool, like get a lot of views on YouTube, or use TikTok to put previews up of your YouTube channel, because everybody can go viral on TikTok. It's like social media we don't really cast off of social media, but I think it's a huge tool in getting content out there. I think it's really helpful in like getting content created. It's like there's a way to do it to make it work. So I think just formulating a general plan is good. I think it's good to have goals and aspirations. I think it's more important to have the ambition to see that through. And I think it's even more important to know that it takes a really long time. It's not a quick moving industry. I mean, I've been doing this 14 years and I've only been a casting director for like 3 of those. So, and even then I'm still mostly doing like indie film and developmental projects that I'm sort of like taking on as, as pre-financing. So that's hard too. So it's like, it's on the actor side, like my husband's been doing this for 20 years. How long were you doing it before you got the role on Bosch? How long?
I don't like to say that because people add up my age.
Give me a roundabout number. You can give me an estimate.
No, it was a good 10 years, I would say. Right. And so
I would say.
It was a bit. And I was also doing it in Arizona. I was also doing it in Florida before, so that matters to me.
Around.
Yeah. Because I'm from Florida too. So, but I do think it takes a little bit of time. And I think what happens is no matter how many times we say it, people think when you come out here, you're going to be that overnight sensation. Right. And also, just to talk shop here, Alexis, like when you book that, because I booked Bosch, I don't know if you know this, I booked it as a one-day co-star.
I remember you telling the story, just a little tidbit of it. Yes, this is fascinating.
Yeah. So I booked it as a one-day co-star, uniform officer number 1, right? And so the pilot, we shot the pilot, and I went to the Soho House and saw that. We saw it. They, what do you call it? Screened it. Yeah. And the producer and the director and the writer, Michael Connelly, they all came up to me afterwards. It was like 3 of them. I remember we were on the steps in the theater, and they were like, "It was such a pleasure cutting your footage." He's like, "You just were so great." And I remember like thinking when I was there on set, I was like, "Well, I might be a one-day co-star, but I'm gonna live, right? I'm gonna really do my part." And they said, they're like, well, I was like, well, if you need a cop, I'm your man. They're like, we'll be seeing a lot more of you. And there's this moment of like, I was like, yeah, right. I was like, because how you've been told that for a while.
Yeah.
But then it's coming to fruition. And I ended up recurring for 6 episodes that season, the first season, and then getting bumped up in the season 3, right? And to guest star, then recurring guest, then top of show guest. And, a lot of people, and this is what they don't get about our industry is Amazon, they had 5 slots for series regulars. That was their and every year we were like, I'm doing 10 out of 10 episodes. I have my own storyline, and we're like, this is what a series regular would bump up to. But, because Amazon had that, we couldn't get that. But one of the things that I do know in my heart is Pierce was a series regular, right? And I think because also a lot of the top of show guests now that are there for the whole entire seasons are the new series regulars. It's a money thing, right? Like if you can pay me, let's say top of show can get 10 grand and then series regular can get 17, automatically you're saving $7,000. And it comes down.
And it's structured differently too. So it is interesting that you say this, because I think you're now opening up the door for conversations that a lot of actors don't get to hear. Like your ladder and steps you took are even different than a lot of other people's steps to a co-star or guest star recurring. So you kind of did it all in one show, which is totally not the normal way to do it. So it's like, I think that, and you also went into it this open mind, was like, I'm just going to have fun with this role and I'm going to do my job. And naturally, they were drawn to you because of the person that you are and the work that you did. So I feel like there is something to be said for every opportunity that we get handed, especially as actors. You just never know. You never know who's on set. You never know who wrote that episode or directed that episode, who's editing that episode, and what else they're going to go work on in the future and how they're going to remember you. And when you meet the casting directors, you never know either what they'll remember you for.
Well, also just remembering that this will not only be their only show. That's what actors don't break. You got to remember that all the directors that I've met over the 7 years or producers, they're all going to go off and do other things because show's in. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
You know?
So true.
Yeah.
I mean, I
so
think that's such a lovely note to give actors as encouragement, because I love actors. It's like a huge part of my job, obviously. And the relationships I build with actors go on. It's the same thing. I have this TV show I'm packaging, and like one of my friends, I'm like, hey, do you want to come on and also be a producer? So like, you never know. And I know a lot of actors do that for each other too. Like as they move on and they do their shows, they bring each other on. So it's true. I think it's more about the relationships in this industry than anything, which I don't think is a big secret. I think a lot of people know that the relationships are a huge thing in the film industry. But I don't think they realize that that also falls down to actors too. Actors' relationships are really important, especially in the dawn of creating your own content and indie film and indie TV production. I think that the connections you build on set and at each job are so important. And getting those auditions isn't the end all be all. It's also the process of getting there. And it does take a long time.
Well, not only just getting it, but also understanding that every audition you get was something I had to learn. This was a hard one. Everybody listen to this. Every audition you get is not going to be right for you. Right? It's not, and it's okay that you're not going to book everything. Just do your best in it. That's what I just try to do, like, you know, and understand that sure, this might've been offered out. Sure, this might've been anywhere, but like not every audition is mine. Like, you know, I mean, did I say that right? They are mine, but I'm not going to book all of them. You know,
they're all opportunities. I know we're like, I just want to add this too, because I feel like we get this conversation going in a lot of actor workshops and Clubhouse, which often feels like mini workshops to me, mini Q&As. A lot of actors are like, you know, I've gone out for this casting office literally 30 times and they still haven't booked me a job. And I'm like, that's a positive. That's not a negative. I don't know why. I think that there's something in actors' heads. And I know this is just a thing with creatives where we all get into our own heads and we're not exactly optimistic all the time because it is such a hard path to go down. So I feel like there's a lot of optimism to be said in that, though. That means that casting director, first of all, loves you, because they're bringing you in that often. And that means they are really trying to book you that job because they believe you can do it and they're just waiting for it to happen. So I know it sometimes feels like there's not a lot of feedback or like two-way conversation when it comes to actors and casting directors, but just know that the auditions, those are compliments every single time. Every single time you get an audition, that means that that casting director is seeing you and remembering you and knowing you. And that's important too.
Hey Alexis, will you do us a favor here? When we're gonna manifest this for you, but when you possibly get that, not possibly, when you get that Game of the Thrones-esque, you know, show, film that we're not gonna talk about right now, will you come back and talk to us for like 30 minutes? Like, will you come back afterwards?
I talk to you every day. It's been so lovely. I mean, then we talk about some really serious stuff, and you know, I love talking about diversity in casting. I love talking about self-tapes and technology. I love talking about how our industry needs to change. I know people are going to be mad at me for some of the things I've said. I want to say I apologize to anybody who didn't like what I had to say. And it's just my opinion and everybody can have their own. But at the end of the day, I just want to see everybody having the same opportunities and having their skills and their expertise valued and appreciated. And I want everybody to feel seen and heard. And I think that's a huge part of casting. Like there's so little coming from our point of view that I just want actors to be encouraged by your podcast if they're listening, that we do see you and hear you and we remember you. There's probably very few offices who don't watch every single self-tape or something. So I'm going to speak in majority terms that just know that going forward. I know it's going to be tough in the self-tape era to feel like you're being seen and heard, but you are.
Tough if we fight it. If we fight it, if we embrace this could be major. Everybody out there, this could be a major turning point of us getting this and really owning the process. It's powerful if we can think about it. If we think about like what we do, like, because like I said, don't romanticize the room. Don't romanticize the room.
I think that's such a big thing. You just said it. It's like, embrace this process because there is so much ownership in it for actors right now. Like this is the era of the actors process being like completely your own.
Yeah. Thank you.